Before dawn's first pale light had crept over the Palatine Hill, Marcus Aurelius sat alone in his imperial tent, ink and wax by his side. Outside, the northern legions shivered beneath a bitter wind, their standard-bearers huddled against the ramparts of a frontier fortress under siege. News had arrived the previous night that the barbarians, unrelenting and unafraid, had razed the outlying farms. Supply wagons were wrecked on the frozen roads. Even the bravest souls among the legions whispered of retreat. In that moment of crisis, Marcus could have yielded to despair. He knew the risks. Rome's enemies were emboldened by her weakness, her allies demoralized, her people frightened. Yet, as emperor and philosopher, he remembered a central Stoic tenet. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Rather than shrink from the barbarians' advance, he donned his armor, wrapped his cloak tight against the cold, and marched alongside his men. As he strode through the camp, men of the second and third cohorts recognized him, not as a distant potentate, but as one of them. He knelt to tend to a frost-bitten sentry, shared scraps of rations with a man whose hands trembled more from fear than hunger, and he spoke words that burned through the fog of their doubt. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. In those simple phrases lay the heart of his philosophy. Adversity need not break you if you master your inner response. The next morning, the barbarians attacked without warning. Instead of fleeing, the legions held the line. Their shields locked, their swords rose, and they repelled the invaders who had expected an easy victory. In the heat of battle, Marcus observed a centurion whose strength faltered. He called to him, placed a firm hand on his shoulder, and reminded him, the mind adapts and converts to its own purposes, the obstacle to our acting. The impediment to action advances action. Strengthened by his words, the centurion returned to the fray and stood unbroken until the sun rose high above the ramparts. That is the first lesson of never giving up. When the path seems blocked, the obstacle itself reveals the way forward. In adversity, your purpose clarifies. You learn the measure of your own resilience, not when life is easy, but when every step demands courage. Months later, Rome faced another trial, the Antonine Plague. It crept through the legions like a silent predator, claiming the young and old alike. Senators, soldiers, and commoners fell ill in their thousands. Fear gripped the streets of the city as temple crowds swelled with desperate prayers for deliverance. Some urged the emperor to flee to a safer province. Others whispered that the gods had abandoned Rome, that the empire would crumble under this invisible scourge. Marcus remained. He donned the simple attire of a physician, linen tunic, bare head, and moved from home to home, tending the sick himself. When his own daughter succumbed to fever, he mourned not as a distant ruler but as a father, writing in his meditations, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love." That reflection was not escape from grief, but a beacon in it, a reminder that life, even in its most fragile form, is still worth the struggle. He organized relief efforts, ensured grain shipments to starving districts, and mobilized his Praetorian Guard to care for the dying. In every act, he embodied the Stoic ideal that action aligned with virtue dispels despair. He could not stop the plague, but he could choose to face it with compassion and unyielding resolve. That is the second lesson. When calamity strikes, find a way to serve. Your commitment to purpose becomes the armature that holds up your will. Even if you cannot change the event, You can shape your response, and in that, you discover your own indomitable spirit. Centuries later, history offers another example of unwavering resolve: Admiral Horatio Nelson at the Battle of Trafalgar. Facing the combined French and Spanish fleets, his outnumbered British ships risked annihilation. Yet Nelson sailed in with a signal flying, "England expects that every man will do his duty." He knew the odds, he felt the fear, but he chose to press forward. Though mortally wounded in the engagement, his fleet secured a decisive victory that shaped European history. Nelson's stoic courage reminds us, duty and resolve can triumph over overwhelming odds if you refuse to yield. In your own life, whether you face a personal loss, a career setback, or the pressures of daily grind, these ancient examples resonate. You may not stand on a frozen frontier, face a plague, or command mighty fleets, but you too will meet moments when giving up feels natural, when the path is dark and every step seems futile. Imagine you have worked tirelessly to launch a project. Hours of research, nights spent perfecting your presentation, only to see it fail at the final hurdle. You feel the sting of disappointment. Your investment of time, your hopes for success, evaporated in an instant. You could retreat into self-pity or blame. Instead, recall Marcus Aurelius on the Danube. The impediment to action advances action. Ask yourself, what lesson lies hidden in this setback? Perhaps it is that your plan overlooked a key detail, or that you lacked the allies needed to succeed. Let that insight refine your next attempt. Or consider someone who loses a loved one. Grief can paralyze the strongest hearts. Yet, like Marcus in the plague-ridden streets, you can choose to honor that loss, not by succumbing to despair, but by carrying forward the memory of the departed through acts of kindness and purpose, volunteering, caring for others, holding fast to gratitude for the time you shared. In daily practice, never giving up begins with simple rituals. Each morning, recount 3 things you will do because they matter. Small acts of courage as vital as any grand victory. Perhaps you will speak honestly to someone who expects half-truths. Perhaps you will practice your craft for an extra hour when you feel exhausted. Perhaps you will comfort a friend who has lost hope. In these choices you affirm, adversity will not define me. My actions will. When you feel overwhelmed by life's demands, deadlines at work, family pressures, the endless digital noise, step away and remember Marcus's words. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. Not merely a posture, but a stance of the mind. Breathe deeply, square your shoulders, and remind yourself that you, too, stand in the long line of those who refused to break. At night, review your day as Marcus did. Write down moments where you yielded too easily, where fear triumphed over action. Then, identify one lesson, how you might respond differently tomorrow. This practice of self-audit transforms frustration into growth. You do not chase perfection. You refine your character step by step. When doubt creeps in, when you ask whether any of this matters in a vast, indifferent universe, recall Marcus's cosmic perspective. Dwell on the beauty of life. Watch the stars and see yourself running with them. In that image, you find wonder that transcends your struggles. As small as you may seem, you are part of a grand tapestry. Your choices ripple outward in ways you cannot yet see. So, to the young man who watches this now, know this: life will test you relentlessly. You will face moments that demand every ounce of your courage. To never give up is not to deny the weight of suffering. It is to anchor yourself in values that outlast any trial. It is to harness setbacks as stepping stones, to mold grief into compassion, to temper fear into resolve. Stand with Marcus on the frontier, in the plague-ravaged streets, on the blood-soaked decks of Trafalgar. Let their resolve become your own. When the horizon darkens, when hope falters, when voices urge you to concede, remember, the impediment to action advances action. Let every obstacle reveal a new path. Remember, you have power over your mind, not outside events. In that knowledge, claim your freedom. Remember, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Then rise and step forward. For in the end, the measure of a life is not the absence of adversity, but the courage with which you meet it. Never give up. Stand unbowed and discover in yourself the strength to endure, to triumph, and to lead a life worthy of the Stoic name.